Welcome to the deep dive. We've got some interesting source material you sent over, and today our goal is really to dig into some potential investment strategies. Specifically, thinking about those properties at 5444 Camelia and 1156 Kingsley.
Right, and how they fit into a bigger picture.
Exactly. We'll explore some approaches other investors might look at, especially how real estate can help diversify away from just, stocks.
Yeah, which is a really key point for a lot of people.
And we'll touch on some tax things that might pop up, but very important disclaimer up front. This is all just for understanding the possibilities.
Absolutely. You definitely need to talk to your own tax professional before making any decisions. We're just exploring ideas here.
We want to help you get informed, sort of efficiently, maybe spark some thoughts.
So diversification first. It's smart thinking, looking beyond just the stock market.
Why is that so critical? I mean, stocks are where a lot of growth happens, right?
They can be, absolutely.
Yeah.
But they also come with volatility, ups and downs. Real estate can offer a different kind of stability.
Stability.
And different returns, too.
Yeah, different types. You've got potential rental income. Maybe the property value goes up over time, and then these tax advantages we're going to talk about.
Okay.
So it balances things out.
It can, yeah. For many investors, having that real estate piece creates a more, let's say, resilient financial picture overall. Getting a handle on some of these real estate-specific strategies is empowering.
All right, let's get into those strategies then for Camelia and Kingsley. One term that came up was cost segregation. What is that, basically?
Okay, cost segregation. So think of it like this. Normally, you buy a residential rental property, you depreciate the building itself over a long time, right? 27.5 years.
Right, the standard schedule.
With cost segregation, you hire experts to do a study. They look closely at the property and identify specific components, things like fixtures, maybe special flooring, HVAC systems, even some landscaping elements.
Okay, and what do they do with those?
They reclassify them. Instead of being part of the building depreciated over 27.5 years, these items get classified as personal property or land improvements.
And that matters because?
Because those categories have much shorter depreciation lives. We're talking maybe 5, 7, or 15 years instead of nearly 30.
Ah, I see. So you get to deduct the cost of those specific things much faster.
Exactly. You accelerate your depreciation deductions. This means, potentially, a much bigger reduction in your taxable income in those first few years you own the property.
Which improves cash flow.
Right. Lower taxes early on means more cash in your pocket, especially if these properties have, say, recent upgrades or lots of these identifiable components. A cost seg study could unlock significant early savings.
Worth looking into then. Weighing the cost of the study against the potential tax benefit.
Definitely something to discuss with a tax pro. It depends on the property specifics.
Okay. Now, another thing mentioned was bonus depreciation. How does that fit in? Is it related?
Somewhat related in that it's also about accelerating deductions, but it works a bit differently. Bonus depreciation lets you take a big immediate deduction for the cost of certain qualified property in the year you put it into service.
Instead of spreading it out over years.
Correct. You don't spread it over the asset's life. For a while, under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, you could actually deduct 100%.
100%.
Wow. Yeah. 100% for qualified property bought and put in service after late September 2017 and before January 1st, 2023. That percentage is phasing down now, though.
So if someone put in, say, a new roof or major system during that peak window?
If it qualified, yes. Instead of deducting, say, $20,000 a year for 10 years on a $200,000 improvement, you might have deducted the whole $200,000 in year one.
That frees up a lot of capital quickly.
That's the goal, to encourage investment by freeing up short-term capital. But there are catches.
Always catches. Like what?
Well, first, it primarily offsets income tax. So you need enough taxable income from the properties or potentially elsewhere, depending on your situation, to actually use the deduction.
Okay, it doesn't just magically create a refund if there's no income.
Right. And second, there's recapture. If you take that big deduction and then sell the property later for a gain...
The IRS wants some of that back.
Sort of. The amount you depreciated can be taxed as ordinary income upon sale, not potentially lower capital gains rates. So it's an acceleration, not an elimination.
Timing matters then, especially with the phase down.
Absolutely. And state rules can differ too. States don't always follow the federal bonus depreciation rules.
Good point. Okay, shifting gears slightly. The sources mention the classification residential rental property. Why does that label matter so much?
It's fundamental for depreciation. Under the tax code, Section 168 defines it. Generally, it's a building where 80% or more of the gross rent comes from people living their dwelling units, like houses or apartments.
Not hotels or transient housing.
Exactly. Hotels, motels where more than half the units are for transients, those usually don't count. It specifically excludes that.
And if you live in part of it yourself?
The law says the rental value of the owner-occupied part is included when calculating that 80% threshold.
Okay. And why is this 80% test the key?
Because meeting that definition locks you into the standard depreciation schedule for residential rentals, that 27.5 years we mentioned earlier, for the building structure itself. If it didn't meet that test, it might fall under non-residential real property, which has a different, longer depreciation period, typically 39 years.
So knowing how Camelia and Kingsley generate their income is crucial for determining that basic depreciation timeline.
Precisely. It's step one in figuring out the long-term tax picture.
Okay. Now, there was also some talk, I think, maybe about using real estate losses to offset other taxes, like capital gains. How does that usually work?
The general rule is pretty strict. Rental real estate is typically considered a passive activity.
Passive meaning you can't just deduct losses against your regular job income?
Correct. Passive losses can generally only offset passive income from other rentals or other passive investments. You can't usually use them to reduce taxes on your W-2 wages or portfolio income like stock dividends.
But are there exceptions? I think one source mentioned a small one.
There is one limited exception. If your modified adjusted gross income, MAGI, is below certain thresholds, it phases out between 100K and 150K, you might be able to deduct up to $25,000 of rental real estate losses against your non-passive income.
Okay, but that's limited and income dependent. What about bigger losses or for higher earners? The sources talked about being a real estate professional.
Yes. That's the big exception. This is a specific tax status you can potentially qualify for.
How does that work?
If you, or potentially your spouse, qualifies as a real estate professional in the eyes of the IRS and you materially participate in your rental activities.
Materially participate, meaning actually running the show.
Yeah, basically. It's not passive anymore. If you meet the tests, your rental activities are treated as non-passive or active.
And then the losses.
Then those losses, including potentially large ones from depreciation, like we discussed, might be deductible against your other non-passive income, like W-2 wages.
That sounds potentially huge.
Yeah.
What does it take to qualify?
It's tough. The IRS has specific tests. Generally, you need to spend more than half your total working time during the year in real property trades or businesses where you materially participate.
More than half your work time.
Yes, and that time has to be more than 750 hours in the year.
Wow. Okay. So it's not just dabbling.
Not at all. It often involves things like managing the properties day to day, handling repairs, leasing, making major decisions. One strategy, sometimes discussed, involves a spouse who maybe works less or isn't working, dedicating significant time to meet these requirements.
So one spouse could potentially qualify the couple.
Potentially, yes, if they meet the hours and material participation tests for the rental activities. But the record keeping has to be meticulous. You need to prove it to the IRS.
That definitely sounds like something you need serious tax advice on.
Absolutely critical. It's complex, and the stakes are high if you get it wrong.
Okay. One last area mentioned briefly in the sources, qualified opportunity zones, or QOZs. Does that apply here?
Well, it's a separate thing, not directly tied to just owning these specific properties unless they happen to be in a QOZ and you're investing new capital gains. It's a federal program designed to spur investment in economically distressed areas.
How does it work? In a nutshell.
If you have capital gains, say, from selling stock, you can potentially defer paying tax on those gains if you reinvest them within 180 days into a qualified opportunity fund, or QOF.
A special fund.
Yes, and that fund then has to invest in businesses or property located within a designated QOZ. If you hold the investment long enough, there can be further benefits, like potentially excluding some of the deferred gain from tax altogether.
So it's about reinvesting gains into specific zones, not just buying property anywhere.
Exactly. It's a specific tool for deferring and potentially reducing tax on existing capital gains by directing that money into targeted areas. Probably less directly relevant to just managing Camelia and Kingsley unless those conditions apply.
Got it. So let's try to wrap this up. We've covered quite a few potential strategies that investors might consider for properties like 5444 Camelia and 1156 Kingsley.
We hit on cost segregation.
Right, for faster depreciation on components.
And bonus depreciation for potentially big upfront deductions on qualified improvements, though that's phasing down.
We talked about why just knowing it's residential rental property matters for the basic depreciation clock.
Yep, the 27.5 years versus potentially longer.
And then the whole complex area of passive losses versus potentially getting real estate professional status to deduct losses against other income.
That's a big one, but with high hurdles. And we briefly touched on QOZs as a separate track for reinvesting capital gains.
It really underscores why diversification beyond just stocks can open up different possibilities, especially on the tax side.
Definitely. Real estate has its own unique set of rules and potential advantages.
And repeating our crucial reminder, these are just concepts other investors use based on the info we had. This is purely informational.
Absolutely. Your situation is unique. Tax laws change. You absolutely must sit down with your own qualified tax professional and financial advisors before you act on any of this.
They can help you see if any of these strategies actually make sense for you, for Camelia, for Kingsley, within your whole financial picture.
So maybe the final thought for you, the listener, is this. How might these diverse strategies, or even others we didn't cover, fit into your specific goals for these properties? Thinking about Camelia and Kingsley's unique features, what less conventional approaches might be worth kicking around with your advisors?
Lots to think about. See you next time.